Welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into one of the most debated and emotional topics of our time, a story that has defined global politics, reshaped alliances, and redrawn the mental map of international security. It is the story of Ukraine's fight for survival, its struggle for sovereignty, and the statement made recently by Donald Trump that Ukraine can, in fact, take back all of its land occupied by Russia. Whether you agree with him or not, the weight of those words has resonated across headlines, within diplomatic circles, and among millions who have watched this war unfold with fear, grief, and hope. Tonight, we will explore this statement through the lens of history, strategy, human sacrifice, and the power of belief. We will not just look at the statement itself but unravel it as a story of land, of resilience, of war, and of the dream of reclaiming every single piece of soil that Ukraine calls its own. The story begins not in the present but years ago, in the cold month of February 2014, when the first fissures of conflict began. Crimea, a peninsula with deep historical, cultural, and strategic significance, was annexed by Russia almost overnight. Many in the world were stunned, but the invasion was swift, almost bloodless, and marked a turning point in post-Soviet history. That event was the spark that would later ignite into the full-scale war we see today. Fast forward to February 24, 2022, the date etched in history is the day Russian troops poured across Ukraine's borders in multiple directions, triggering Europe's largest conflict since World War II. For many, it was unimaginable. For Ukrainians, it was a nightmare come alive. As the world reacted, as sanctions were rolled out, as weapons began to flow in, and as cities like Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Mariupol became household names across the globe, the narrative of Ukraine shifted. No longer was it simply a former Soviet republic with ties to Europe, it became the front line of democracy versus autocracy, of freedom versus aggression. And in that battle, Ukraine earned admiration for something few expected: resilience. The images of ordinary citizens taking up arms, of farmers towing tanks with their tractors, of a comedian-turned-president refusing to flee and instead declaring, "I need ammunition, not a ride," all of this created a story of defiance that no propaganda could erase. Into this unfolding drama enters Donald Trump's statement: Ukraine can take back all of its land occupied by Russia. At first glance, it is just a sentence. But in the realm of geopolitics, words have power. They carry weight, they signal intent, and they influence morale. For Ukrainians, such a statement from a former president of the United States can be both inspiring and controversial. On one hand, it is a declaration of possibility, a belief that what has been taken can be restored. On the other hand, it raises questions: is this truly possible? Does Ukraine have the means, the manpower, the support, and the endurance to achieve something that seems so monumental? To understand this, we need to step into the shoes of those on the ground. Imagine a Ukrainian soldier stationed near the front lines in the Donbass region. The trenches are muddy, the nights are cold, and artillery echoes across the horizon. Every day is a test of survival. For him, the land is not an abstract concept, it is the soil beneath his boots, the village where his family once lived, the road that leads to the home he may never see again. When he hears a world leader say Ukraine can take back all of its land, it means more than politics, it means hope. Hope that his sacrifice will not be in vain, that the struggle will lead to restoration, and that justice is still possible in a world often ruled by might. But storytelling is not only about the soldier, it is about the farmer, the teacher, the mother with a child. In occupied territories, the Ukrainian flag has been torn down, schools are forced to teach a different curriculum, and the sound of another language is imposed on daily life. For these people, reclaiming the land is not just about borders, it is about identity, about being allowed to exist as who they are. Trump's words, then, become a story of liberation. They paint a picture of returning home, of raising the blue and yellow flag once more, of reclaiming not only territory but dignity. Now, let us weave in the global perspective. For years, analysts have debated the outcome of this war. Can Ukraine really win back Crimea? Can it push Russian troops out of the Donbass? The skeptics point to Russia's size, its resources, its nuclear arsenal, and its willingness to grind down its adversary with sheer attrition. They argue that a complete Ukrainian victory is a dream, not a realistic goal. But history often surprises us. Who predicted that the Soviet Union would collapse as fast as it did? Who believed that Afghanistan, a country with far fewer resources, could drive out two superpowers in a generation? Wars are not only fought with weapons, they are fought with spirit, with narrative, with the collective will of a people refusing to accept defeat. Trump's statement, in essence, taps into that spirit. It is not about military calculations on a map, it is about the story of an underdog fighting against the odds. Stories matter. They drive nations, inspire movements, and shape the future. When Churchill stood before the British people in 1940 and said, "We shall never surrender," he was not calculating divisions and tank numbers. He was crafting a story of resistance that carried his nation through the darkest days of the Blitz. In the same way, telling Ukraine that it can take back all its land is about feeding that flame of resistance, about refusing to accept that might makes right. Of course, every story has its conflicts, its doubts, its antagonists. For Trump's words to become reality, a series of monumental challenges must be overcome. Ukraine's military, though resilient and increasingly well-trained, still faces shortages of ammunition, air defense systems, and modern fighter jets. Its population is strained, its economy battered. Russia, despite setbacks, maintains deep reserves of manpower and weaponry. For every Ukrainian advance, there is a counteroffensive. For every liberated town, there is a village reduced to rubble. And in between are the civilians, caught in the middle, paying the highest price. So what does it mean to say Ukraine can take back all of its land? It means envisioning not just battles but victories. Picture the Ukrainian flag once more over Crimea, crowds in Sevastopol cheering, a symbolic reversal of 2014. Picture Donetsk and Luhansk returning to Ukrainian governance, with families reuniting after years of separation. These images are powerful because they are tied to longing, to memory, to the idea of home. Yet, the road to that image is long and brutal. Every inch of reclaimed land demands lives, courage, and unimaginable resilience. To tell this story fully, we must not shy away from the pain. Cities like Mariupol have been destroyed, thousands have been buried under rubble. The scars will remain long after the war ends. And yet, those scars may become the foundation for a rebirth, just as European cities once rebuilt after the devastation of World War II. Trump's statement, controversial as it may be, plays into this narrative of rebirth. It says, "Don't stop believing. Don't accept the lines on today's map as final. Don't let occupation become permanent." It is, in essence, a rallying cry disguised as a prediction. Now, let us pause and imagine the future. Imagine the day when the last Russian soldier withdraws from Ukrainian territory. What would that day look like? Would there be fireworks in Kyiv, tears in Kherson, celebrations in Crimea? Would the world acknowledge it as a triumph of justice, or would it be framed as a geopolitical earthquake that shifts alliances forever? Because if Ukraine does take back all of its land, it will not only rewrite its own story, it will rewrite the global order. It will send a message to aggressors everywhere that wars of conquest do not pay. It will remind smaller nations that even against giants, victory is possible. In telling this story, however, we must acknowledge another angle. What if Ukraine does not take back all of its land? What if the war freezes, leaving occupied territories under Russian control? That too is part of the narrative, the sobering possibility that words of encouragement do not always match reality. And yet, even in that scenario, the story of Ukraine would not be one of defeat but of endurance. Because what Ukraine has already achieved, the defense of Kyiv, the liberation of Kherson, the resilience against a much larger foe, has already etched it into history as a nation that refused to bow. This is where storytelling becomes crucial. The words of Trump, like the words of any leader, do not exist in isolation.